Hey everybody, I'm Ryan. Today we're going to talk about Pauper and do a deck tech on my favorite deck in Pauper, which is Caw-Gate. So let's check it out. So Caw-Gate is a kind of interesting deck. I'm going to talk about the overall strategies and then some specific card choices first. So the whole point of the deck is you play a bunch of gates, and then use the card Basilisk Gate, which it is not letting me zoom in on, so that's super annoying as a deck tech situation. It's also not letting me click on stuff. This is the second time Magic Online's done this. It's basically working against me, and everything's awful. So Basilisk Gate essentially says target creature gets +X/+X until end of turn, where X is the number of gates you control. You can only activate it as a sorcery, so it costs 2 mana, and you tap it to activate. So you have a bunch of gates, so you always have you can +X/+X by a lot. And then you're pumping up recurring lifelinkers like Sacred Cat, cards with evasion like Squadron Hawk, and cards that essentially are unkillable in this format, which is the Guardian of the Guild pack, which is a 2/3 protection from monocolored. You're pumping those up to end the game. At this deck's core is that it is a blue-white control deck. You draw cards, you counter spells, you remove creatures, and you win the game. It's also really, really good at racing through Prismatic Strands, which is essentially a fog with flashback in white. So let's talk about these specific card choices. Citadel Gate and Sea Gate, when they enter the battlefield, you could choose a color, and it'll tap for either blue or white, depending on if it's Citadel or Sea Gate, and the color that you choose, which means that we get to play a bunch of off-color stuff, even though we're a blue-white control deck, which you probably see in the sideboard, and the Suffocating Fumes in the main deck. Most of the time, you're just going to say the color that it's not, but if you sided in cards that are in these off-colors, it's awesome. Heapgate is also solid as just another gate and a place to dump your mana. As far as the creature suite goes, Sacred Cat, again, is just a lifelinker with recursion, which means the goal is to have something that you can always pump up with. Basilisk Gate is really good at racing. Squadron Hawk allows you to fill up your hand with these hawks. You get a bunch of these cards with recursion, which you can attack with the gate. There's also some really cool synergies that we can talk about in a second. And Guardian of the Guild Pact. The thing about Pauper is that there's not a lot of multicolored cards at all. So something like Guardian of the Guild Pact becomes really, really difficult to kill and essentially is unblockable. So Brainstorm, at its core, is okay, right? We have Brainstorm. We can do the classic Legacy Brainstorm thing where we draw 3, put 2 cards we don't want on top of our library, and then we can shuffle our decks with cards like Ash Barons and Squadron Hawk. But if you do it in a certain order, the Brainstorm Squadron Hawk combo is great. So if you start with Squadron Hawk, you play Squadron Hawk, you get 3 more Squadron Hawks into your hand. So now you have 3 Squadron Hawks in your hand. You cast Brainstorm, get to draw 3 cards, put 2 of those 3 Squadron Hawks on top of your deck, and then cast Squadron Hawk. You get to search those 2 out of your deck, so Brainstorm just turns into just draw 3 cards, which is really, really an amazing synergy. I play one of Force Spike in one of the deck's flex slots. I just want another counterspell that can hit anything. There's a couple tap-out green decks that I kind of wanted to get them with. But there's a lot of cards you can play in this flex slot. I just have been enjoying Force Spike lately. I also play Spell Pierce in one of the other flex slots. Spell Pierce is obviously very good in a lot of situations. And then Preordain, which is probably the best cantrip in the format. And that's all you're really using it for. Which, by the way, combos fine with Brainstorm as well. Brainstorm, put 2 cards you don't want on top of your deck. Cast Preordain, put those 2 cards on top of your deck and the bottom of your deck, and then you get a fresh card. So it's less good than the Squadron Hawk combo, or just shuffling it away with Ash Barons, or even just shuffling away with Squadron Hawk. But it's pretty okay. We're playing Journey to Nowhere. Journey to Nowhere exiles a creature. So remember, the idea is to be able to get rid of creatures, pump your homies up, and then attack. But also, again, at this deck's core, it's a blue-white control deck. We need to remove these problematic creatures that our opponents have. Before I talked about Squadron Hawk, the Modern Age is another one of our creatures. So it allows us to draw a card, then discard a card twice. So allows us to see a lot of our deck, get rid of cards that we don't need, or even discard cards like Sacred Cat or Prismatic Strands, things that we can cast from our graveyard. So it's you lose less of a card, you lose more like when you discard a card, you lose half a card instead of a full card. We get to do things like that. And then it flips into Vector Glider, which is an enchantment creature with spirit and flying. So again, just another great creature with evasion. I'm really sorry Magic Online is not allowing me to zoom in on any of these cards. It does that sometimes, which is really lame, and now it's frozen on me again. Please stop, Magic Online. You're playing Counterspell, just 2 mana, deal with something. Again, this is a blue-white control deck. I don't know what else to say about Counterspell. Prismatic Strands is a really interesting card, because like, originally you don't think this card would fit in this deck very well. But how a lot of games end, and probably about half of the games end, is like you counter their important stuff, you remove their creatures, but then you have a creature with evasion that you're hitting in with Basilisk Gate, and they're rebuilding their board and they're starting to attack you. And Prismatic Strands allows you to survive, right? You jam in with like Guardian of the Guildpack or Squadron Hawk or even the Vector Glider with a Basilisk Gate. You hit them for 5 or 6, they attack you, Prismatic Strands. During your turn, you hit them for 5 or 6 again, bring back Sacred Cat with Embalm, pass the turn, they attack you, you flashback Prismatic Strands by tapping the Sacred Cat, or play another copy of Squadron Hawk from your hand and be able to flashback Prismatic Strands. And you win races like that. And a lot of games end in that fashion. The last card in the main deck we're going to talk about is Suffocating Fumes. This is another flex slot. Just solid against a lot of decks, specifically like is pretty good in the mirror. There's a lot of hands where they play Sacred Cat, flash it back, or just like start casting Squadron Hawks from their hand and start beating it in the air. And Sacred Fumes is great because it deals with that. It's okay against a lot of different decks. And if it's not good against the deck, you can just cycle it, which is fine. As far as the sideboard goes, we have Dust to Dust for these pesky artifact decks. There's a reasonable Grixis artifact deck running around that plays the artifact lands. I mean, you'll hit the lands with Dust to Dust is dope. But just deal with artifacts in general. Blue Elemental Blast for the red decks. Red Burn and the red artifact deck are two of the best decks in the format. So it's really important to play 4 of those. I'm sorry, I have different arts. Arms of Hadar. Most of the decks that Suffocating Fumes is good against. Arms of Hadar is also good against. It's really good against these go-wide strategies. Again, like the Kodaltha red deck. Gorilla Shaman is, again, really solid against that Grixis artifact deck, especially since, Gorilla Shaman often turns into, the pay 1 mana, get to destroy a land card, which is really sweet. And again, we can cast these off-color cards with Citadel Gate and Sea Gate, where we just name the off-color color. Red Elemental Blast for the control deck and blue deck mirror. There's a blue fairies deck, there's a blue tempo deck, and also this mirror match is really solid against. But if you snipe a Modern Age or win a counterspell battle against the card counterspell, you're up on mana and cards, which is amazing. And then Relic Progenitus for various graveyard hate, which is often really important. I actually even like it in the mirror match, because it can hit Sacred Cat, it can hit Prismatic Strands, so it often means we end up winning races if they don't have the recurring lifelinker and don't have the, the fog or whatever. So there you have Caw-Gate in Pauper. I hope you enjoyed this deck tech. This is my favorite deck in Pauper at the moment. And if you want to hear more about it and want to hear more things like this, please be sure to like and subscribe. Check me out on social medias. Links are above me and in the description. Thank you all so much for watching. I'll see you next time. Bye-bye.